A very exciting piece of theater history is currently playing out in front of the world. The Great Gatsby has gone into the public domain. That means that its copyright has expired. As a result, there are two competing Great Gatsby-based Broadway musicals. One of them has already gone up on Broadway, called The Great Gatsby, and the other is currently in its regional theater run at the Art Theater in Boston, and it's simply titled Gatsby. Now, to differentiate between the two of them for the purposes of this video, I'm going to refer to them as the Broadway Theater Gatsby and the Art Gatsby, but I already had a trip scheduled to go and visit my lovely sister, who lives in New York City. And truthfully, I had already bought us tickets to see the Broadway Theater Gatsby. But imagine my surprise when I found out that Gatsby was going to start its regional theater run while I was on the East Coast. So here's the thing. When I found out that it was a possibility that I could see both Great Gatsby musicals in the same week, I simply had to do it. But I kind of want to take you guys through the journey. This is my first time making a more vlog style video like this. So I don't have some of the footage of me making some of these decisions because I didn't think to record a little clip there. But I got this idea in my head and it just implanted itself like a little nugget. Finally, had a bit too much to drink at D&D with my friends on Cinco de Mayo and bought a ticket to the show Gatsby. Few marks in, bought a ticket, was pretty committed at that point, so I had to figure it out. I had to move my flights, I had to book a train ticket, and then I had to figure out what I was doing with my luggage because I'm not staying in Boston. I'm taking the train in the morning, I'm seeing the show at 2 p.m., and I'm leaving at 7 to fly back to Phoenix. So I don't have anywhere to put a suitcase. So I emailed them and I was like, hey, you guys have a coat check, right? And they were like, no. Bear in mind, I'd bought my ticket and moved my flights at this point, so I was like, well, I've got to figure it out. I bought this because they basically said that if I can fit it on my lap or under my chair, I can bring it into the theater. They assured me of that. So I bought this. This is like a luggage size backpack. And this is what we're doing. This is what we're bringing with us. I'm back. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing for this trip. People backpack all the time. I was like, this is going to work out, except I want to go thrifting with my sister while I'm there. And so I was gonna try to save a bunch of room in my suitcase already for thrifted clothes. So I'm only bringing enough clothing to get me through to the day where my sister and I are gonna go thrifting. So this is gonna be basically empty. And that's what we're doing, folks. And that's what we're doing. All in the name of witnessing theater history. I'm really excited. Hi, my name is Meredith. Welcome back to the channel. Quick disclaimer before we dive in. I think it's only human nature when two things are based off of the same source material to compare them, right? But that wasn't really my attitude going into this, and especially having seen both of them now, I don't really want to be apples to apples comparing them for a few different reasons. The first is that one of these shows is a regional theater run and the other is a Broadway run. So for starters, I just don't think it's fair to do an apples to apples comparison because they're not in the same place in their development. I also just generally don't feel the need to compare them anyway. Directly, I mean. They're very, very different. I was so excited with the opportunity to see two different artistic interpretations of the same work. And just because there are two different interpretations doesn't mean that one of them has to be wrong and one of them has to be right. So that's not my attitude. That's not my approach. So my intention with this video is, on one hand, to explore the source material and the adaptations of it and the different artistic approaches to the adaptations and just all the little tidbits that I found interesting about that. But I won't be sitting here like, I liked the score better in this one, I liked the choreography better in this one, because I don't see the point of that. I don't find that interesting. But before we dive into the musicals themselves and the vlog and the trip, we should probably talk about the book. Now, don't worry, we're not going to be going super in-depth because that's not the purpose of this video. This video is not an in-depth literary analysis of The Great Gatsby. This video is an analysis of the musicals, but I do think there's some context that's super helpful. But I have put chapters down below, so if you're familiar with The Great Gatsby or if you don't care, you can just skip ahead. You won't hurt my feelings, don't worry. The book itself is narrated by Nick Carraway, who has just moved to New York City with the intention of making his own way in life instead of following in his family's footsteps. It's really important to establish that Nick is the narrator of the book. This is a really common thing in classic literature, for it to be from the perspective of a guy that just witnessed the events of everything happening. He was just a guy that was there the whole time, and he's like, let me tell you the story of what I saw. But the reason I think it's important to understand that is because the Fitzgeralds, it's speculated that they were at the very least co-authors, if not that Zelda actually was the one who wrote this book. So the Fitzgeralds drove a lot of the message of the book through Nick's interpretations of the actions. So Nick moves to the East Egg on Long Island. There are these kind of egg-shaped peninsulas, I think, and Gatsby and Nick live on one side and Daisy and Tom live on the other. And Daisy and Tom have a green light at the end of their dock that shows which dock is theirs at night. Is that going to become important? Who's to say? So Nick lives in this pretty modest house, but he lives next to this guy Gatsby, who has this giant mansion and he hosts these huge parties, but he's kind of elusive. A lot of the guests haven't ever really talked to him or seen him. And there's all these rumors about him, and so you hear that people think he killed a man or random other things about him. And we don't actually meet Gatsby himself until about 50 pages into the book. We do, however, meet Daisy and Tom. Daisy is Nick's cousin, so he goes to visit them for dinner. And Daisy's friend Jordan is there as well. She's a professional golfer. Nick is not really impressed with any of these individuals upon the visit, but is especially shocked when he finds out that Tom is cheating on Daisy. Daisy fully knows about it, and the mistress just calls the house whenever. So Tom gets up and leaves their dinner to answer the phone to talk to his mistress, which is crazy. Nick returns to his house after the dinner to see the shadowy figure of Gatsby reaching towards the green light. We're pressed for time in the video. I said I wasn't gonna do a whole book analysis, so I'm just gonna tell you the green light represents the American dream that is kind of unattainable or unreachable, and Daisy represents the happiness and contentment that people expect that they will feel when they achieve their dream. And a whole bunch of plot happens that can basically be boiled down to rich people being bad people, and Nick watching everybody behave and just being like, I hate all of you, basically, inside of his internal monologue. Tom's mistress's name is Myrtle, and she has a husband named George, but Tom calls him Wilson because that's his last name. I have some vlog footage where I called him Wilson a lot. His name is actually George. And I am just gonna call him Wilson for the duration of this to make it easier, because I did call him Wilson in all of the vlog footage because I thought that was his first name. My bad, missed that. Wilson has no idea that Myrtle is cheating on him. He lives in the Valley of the Ashes and he owns a garage and a gas station. There's this giant billboard that was for an eye doctor that the business hasn't been there for a while, and the billboard is just in disrepair now. And it's these two giant eyes with glasses on them. Daisy and Gatsby begin an affair. And Nick and Jordan are somewhat seeing each other for the duration of the book, but it never gets that serious in the book, at least. And Gatsby has a yellow car and it's very flashy. Okay, that's basically all the context we need to hear the ending, which is actually the important part. I mean, all of it's important, don't get me wrong. It's not that long a book, but like I said, we're not doing a book analysis, so we're just gonna skip to the end. Tom has figured out that Daisy is cheating on him with Gatsby at this point, and so it's just kind of awkward, and it's also a really hot day. So they decide to go into the city and get a suite at, I believe it's the Plaza Hotel, but my sister was calling it the Palace, so I don't know if it's the Plaza or the Palace, but I don't think it matters that much. Tom wants to drive Gatsby's car, and he drives it with Nick and Jordan, and Gatsby and Daisy drive into the city in Tom's car. That's important because Tom stops at the garage to get gas from Wilson, where he finds out that Wilson is planning on moving him and Myrtle west. He found out that Myrtle's cheating on him, but it's really clear that he doesn't know that it's Tom. He doesn't know that Tom is the guy that she's seeing. He just knows that she's seeing a wealthy man, basically. And they go into New York City, where Tom confronts Gatsby. What kind of a row are you trying to cause in my house? Gatsby tries to get Daisy to tell Tom that she never loved him, but Daisy can't do it because she's like, that's not true. I did love Tom at one point, but I love you now. I loved you then and I love you now. Isn't that enough? And Gatsby's like, no, that's not enough. I need you to have never loved him. And then Tom is like, well, he made all of his money nefariously. He's a bootlegger. He sells alcohol illegally. He's a horrible man, and that's how he's made all his money. And Daisy's horrified by this. So then Tom is pretty confident that Daisy isn't actually going to leave him at this point, and so he tells Gatsby and Daisy to leave in Gatsby's car, and then Tom and Nick and Jordan are going to follow in Tom's car. And Myrtle runs out into the street and gets hit by one of the cars and is killed instantly. When Tom and Nick and Jordan pull up to the scene of the accident, Tom finds out that Myrtle is dead. Wilson is pretty upset about this, understandably. His wife is dead, and he watched it happen, so he knows it was a yellow car. And he remembers that Tom and Nick and Jordan were just driving through in the same yellow car. But Tom is immediately like, oh, dude, I lied. That wasn't actually my car. He says, I know whose car it is. But Wilson is so out of it that he doesn't ask him in the moment. And then Nick and Jordan and Tom leave. Gatsby is posted up outside of Daisy's house, and Nick sees him outside, and Gatsby explains that Daisy was actually the one driving the car, and Nick is like, dude, you need to get out of town. But Gatsby won't listen to him. He's adamant that he and Daisy are going to run away together. Gatsby goes back to his house, decides to use his pool while he waits for Daisy to call. And as the day goes on, he realizes that Daisy is not going to call him. They are not going to run away together. And Nick speculates that the world has started to look really ugly to him, and it's this really beautiful passage. And then Wilson shows up, shoots Gatsby and kills him, and then kills himself. And we find out later that Wilson had showed up to Tom and Daisy's house with a gun and was like, whose car was it? And Tom was like, that was Gatsby's car. But Tom and Daisy run off. Nick is essentially left to deal with all of Gatsby's affairs, and he finds out that, like, despite the fact that he hosted these huge parties and so many people showed up to it, basically nobody comes to the funeral. It's him, Gatsby's dad, and this like one random party goer that they met at one point, and otherwise nobody else shows up. And Nick is just like floored by this because there were so many people who supposedly loved Gatsby and they would show up to these parties. And then Nick is like, you know what? I don't think I like New York that much, and he moves back to the Midwest. So what's the point? Well, lucky for us, the Fitzgeralds tell us in the very last line of the book, Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther, and one fine morning. And then it kind of like dashes, like it cuts off. So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. It's all a big metaphor for the American dream. So Gatsby gets this idea of Daisy in his head. They only actually dated, I think, for a few months, canonically. But then he gets shipped off to war, and Daisy doesn't wait for him. Daisy ends up marrying someone else. And he's heartbroken by this, but in his head, it's like, I'm going to work super hard. I'm going to get super wealthy because Daisy's kind of from a wealthy family. And I'm going to go prove that I'm like worthy of her. And then I'm going to steal her from her husband. And he gets this idea of Daisy in his head that is nothing like how Daisy actually is. And he builds her up to be this like beautiful, this amazing dream. There are multiple places in the book where when Daisy and Gatsby are interacting, Nick is thinking to himself, surely Gatsby realizes that Daisy is very different from how he remembers, but Gatsby doesn't seem to be able to see it. Like when he is interacting with Daisy, even in those interactions, he's like, yes, this is the woman I remember. But the woman he remembers doesn't really exist. Like he made her up. That isn't how she actually is. Not only that, but Daisy represents kind of the happiness and contentment that we think we're going to have when we achieve our dreams. So then we see that Tom is this like old money, like from money, born into money, wealthy kind of guy, and he owns Daisy. He's careless with all of the things that he owns. He takes them for granted. He doesn't think Daisy's ever going to leave him. He thinks he can run around with these other women, and yet he feels a sense of ownership over Daisy. He's absolutely shocked to find out that she's cheating on him, and he's pissed about it, and he immediately wants to put an end to it, despite the fact that he's having an affair. And it's meant to show how, you know, again, if Daisy is this like contentment, this wealth, this happiness, this feeling that you've like made it, that Tom, who's this old money guy, does not want to give that up to Gatsby, who's this new money guy. And essentially the people who are in the ruling class, the people who are in power, the people who have the wealth and the money, they don't want to share that with other people. Even if you do make it, like you'll never be considered somebody who belongs because you weren't born into it. This is my favorite line. This is right after Myrtle dies and Wilson is having a bit of a breakdown. And he's looking up the advertisement, right? The eyes. God sees everything, repeated Wilson. That's an advertisement. Oh, and then here's where Nick is speculating that the world would have looked really ugly to Gatsby. He must have looked up at an unfamiliar sky through frightening leaves and shivered as he found what a grotesque thing a rose is and how raw the sunlight was upon the scarcely created grass. Just beautiful. And then here's one about Tom and Daisy. Tom is essentially justifying the fact that he told Wilson whose car it was when he knew Wilson had a gun. And he's like explaining what's going on. And Nick is thinking this to himself. I couldn't forgive him or like him, but I saw that what he had done was, to him, entirely justified. It was all very careless and confused. They were careless people, Tom and Daisy. They smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back into their money or their vast carelessness or whatever it was that kept them together and let other people clean up the mess they had made. So that's Great Gatsby. Depressing, right? So with this depressing message in my head, I boarded a train. I put train on here. I boarded a plane and headed to New York City. It was lovely to see my sister and I had so much fun on this whole trip, but that's not what you're here for. You want to know about the shows. Well, my sister Val and I decided to sit down literally immediately after getting home from the Broadway Theater's Great Gatsby and just tell you our feelings about it. After consuming quite a bit of wine, each of us, you're in for a treat. Please enjoy. This is my sister Val.
Hello.
For record, she is not a theater kid, but she's a dancer. And she said to me after the show, maybe I should go watch more theater. And that means something to me.
I do. I mean, every time I see a theater show, I am shocked by how much I enjoy it. I would like to go to more, and I mean, I live here, so it's easy. My overview on Gatsby, I really liked it. I'm very easy to please. Any movie, any show, I don't know how to explain it. I just don't have many opinions.
You're not a hater.
Yeah, I guess.
You like to enjoy things, and that's good.
Yeah. I'm not too jaded. Okay, let's start with this note. I cried a lot because I love love, and I want someone to want me in the way Gatsby and Daisy want each other. Like, to want to be in love in the way that Gatsby and Daisy were. So I do love love, unfortunately. Why did Nick move there? Because if you actually think about it, the only reason he moved there was to move the story along. In actuality, like, he moved there and they ruined his life. He moved away. But I did put that Nick was a very funny character, almost comedic relief. Yes. They should definitely limit how much you can drink at shows.
We didn't drink that much, but we were.
No, but I was like, towards the end, I was ready to get rowdy. No, we were screaming.
Oh, we were. Everybody was. I don't think we stuck out.
Meredith's childhood crush was amazing. Well, I mean, I thought they were all good. That's the thing. But I was shocked that, like, we didn't hear Tom. We heard Tom sing once.
Justice for the Basses on Broadway.
I was shocked because he started singing at the end, and I realized, oh my God, we've never heard Tom sing. He's been there the whole entire time, but we did not hear a peep.
I have a theory about that, but I want to wait until you're done.
So my only real points that I was able to write down that I remembered that I noticed that were like symbolism in some way. One, the eyes. Mr. Doctor, like in the beginning, and this may not be true, but this is from my perception what I saw, that in the beginning it was a dark blue. So when Myrtle passes away and that whole scene happens and they're at that same area where the sign is, it was kind of green. It was more green toned than blue toned, I felt.
But would you say that man had a dream that was not worth chasing in that moment?
What do you mean? See, this is what I'm saying. I don't.
Would you say that Wilson had a dream in that moment that was not worth chasing? What did he do right after that?
He was mad. He went and killed Gatsby.
A dream for vengeance.
And you don't think the vengeance was worth it?
Well, do you think it was?
I mean, but it wasn't true. We know that. Like that.
So the dream he was chasing after wasn't real?
The American dream?
Yes.
Is that what it means? Got there eventually. But that makes sense. The point of the story was kind of through his eyes then to like that the American dream isn't worth it.
Do you feel that there were other points in the show where other characters were chasing dreams that weren't worth it? At maybe every point?
Yeah.
So it's not like Wilson specifically.
I was kind of confused by the Palace Hotel. Like, why did Gatsby do all that? And why didn't they run away right away? Because from what I understood, they were never gonna pull up to the Palace Hotel.
Okay.
They were like, let's run away now. Like, now.
Like, not go to the palace.
Because if we don't do it now, it may never happen. And they were right.
Foreshadowing.
Yes. But yeah, the tile on the wall of his house before he passed away was the same tile that was in the pool that was there for the whole show. Like, the pool was the orchestra pit. It was like the edge of the thingamajig. Whole second half I was gagged.
Okay.
It was very good. Like, Gatsby. Well, okay, first off, the song Back from Intermission was really good.
Yes, Shady.
Yeah.
With Wolfsheim. So the guy who played Wolfsheim was awesome. His voice was awesome, and he was so cute.
He was.
He went to do his little dance, and you and I were like... Oh.
That was funny.
He joined... So most of it, he was singing, and the ensemble was dancing, and then there's a part where he, like, joins in with the ensemble and starts dancing, and he was just, like, so into it. You and I were like...
That's the one thing about your man that I'm remembering now that you bring that up. When he had to join the dance sections, we were actually laughing out loud.
Yes, but like...
No offense to him, but we did laugh out loud.
He's not known as a dancer, but I appreciated his effort. He was putting so much into it.
That's something I love about a Broadway show, because I used to hate, like, I would hate people at competition, or just any dancer who didn't put in the effort.
Yeah.
It pissed me off. I'm like, if you don't want to perform, you actually don't have to perform.
Right. And he was performing at every step.
Yeah.
Like, what?
That's what I love about Broadway shows in general. They all want to perform.
So, I have one more question for you.
Okay.
As
fashion is your profession. What did you think of the costumes in the show?
I would say I honestly, like, I paid attention to it because I always look at clothing in a way, but I don't think it affected the show for me too much. Like, I wasn't thinking about it too much. I did really love the men's fashion. Gatsby's look at the end, I really enjoyed. And I liked the tidbit of the dress cuts, which I don't know if I would have noticed it was for everyone had you not said that, but I definitely noticed that Jordan was always showing up in pants. So maybe eventually I would have put 2 and 2 together. But one thing I did that I was thinking about for some reason is the fact that the shoes always match. In a way, I feel like that's pointless.
Really?
Like, throw her in some tan heels and call it a freaking day. Like, y'all are wasting money. You're wasting time in the quick changes. Like, I just felt like it wasn't... Like, she would have, like, she'd be on stage for 2 minutes in an outfit, and it would have matching shoes.
And you were like, just put her in tan heels and no one's looking at her feet?
Yeah, but I guess I was.
Right.
So...
To notice that, but in a way to say, I don't think... But we're dancers.
Yeah.
So you would look at feet anyway.
But I was also thinking, why are they forcing all the women to wear heels? I mean, maybe because it was the 20s. Is that just Broadway?
They were all wearing character shoes, dyed and...
Yeah, they're classic. If y'all watch Drag Race, Sophia Crystal from the last season, she would always wear those, like, theater shoes.
Yeah.
Because she was, no offense, an older queen. So she's not wearing, like, the stilettos.
Right.
She's wearing, like, literally what they were wearing on stage today was what she was wearing. And Rue was like, I love that every time.
You know what I love about you?
You know what I love about you?
I didn't even notice the shoes. So I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, because I didn't see that.
I mean, it was random. It was very random.
Except for the tap dancers.
That was fun. That was really fun. And it makes me wish I went down a different path. We both could have done theater.
We could have.
I was never a singer, though, but...
Half that ensemble never had a solo.
Yeah, exactly.
We could have done it.
My man, who was the dancer, though, I want to give receipts. Okay, his name is Curtis Holland, and he slayed. He was the best dancer up there by far.
Yeah.
And then he also had the tiniest right at the end. He had, like, a solo singing part.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my god, he can sing. I was very happy for him.
Yeah.
But he did run away from the stage door, so I never got to tell him that.
Yeah. Shout out
told him.
Mariah Reeves.
Favorite beat was the New Money song. Favorite song was probably Gatsby singing for Daisy.
I'm on my soapbox.
School me.
Yeah, I'm on my soapbox now. No, everything you said was great. Prior to going into this, I was led to believe that this was a horrible adaptation of The Great Gatsby. You had all these people saying like, oh, it's a good show, it's a fun show, but it's not a good adaptation of The Great Gatsby. You guys are wrong. So I just read the book again 3 or 4 days ago, right? It's very fresh in my mind. A lot of the commentary was through Nick's eyes. So in the book, Nick narrates the book. So you're viewing everything that happens is like from Nick's perspective. He's there, he witnesses it, he has thoughts about it, he has feelings about it, he's talking about it. So I thought to myself, both of these adaptations, if they're not going to have Nick narrate the show, are going to have to figure out another avenue for getting across the message, because the plot itself is just the plot. So I thought to myself, if they're going to adapt it without Nick as a narrator, which I agree with, because I don't like shows that are narrated, because that would have meant he was talking through the whole thing.
Yeah.
They had to find these other vehicles to get the message across. So I have a few points. The first act was a tiny bit disjointed. There was a clear, you could tell it was rewritten, I think. And I think it was a mistake, because I think the rest of the show was really, really good, and I think it is a lesson in not letting the critics get to you. Because they played it at the Paper Mill Playhouse, and they heard all this criticism that it wasn't a good enough adaptation of the book, and they made a bunch of changes, and they changed the whole beginning, and they rewrote the first 20 minutes, and in my opinion...
To match more to the book. Okay.
And in my opinion, it was a mistake. Because if what we witnessed from the second half of the first act to the end of the show was how cohesive the first piece of the first act was, I genuinely think it would have been better. I don't think it has to be an exact plot point by plot point representation of the book for it to get the message across, and I thought that they did that. And I think that all the people saying that it didn't get the message across do not understand the art form that is theater. Because the whole point of a musical is that it is, every piece of it plays into the entire show. So you have the plot, but you have all the actors and the way they're playing the rules. You have the music, you have the themes of the music, you have like the lighting, the set, all of it is a driver for the plot. and the message. The ending line of him saying, "We run with our arms outstretched," that's what I was saying to you. Like, I was literally in the seat, like, say it, say it, say it. Like, for me, at the end of the show, I felt like if he said the final line of the book, that was all I needed for them to close it out, and he did. He fully basically read the final lines, and he says, we run with our arms outstretched towards the green light, and we'll never reach it, basically. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. That's not the exact right of the line. I feel like it was there, and like when you talked about the eyes turning green, like that's what I mean when I say some people watch theater and they don't get theater. And what I don't understand is the amount of people who go to watch theater and who go to watch previews, who like hate theater as a medium. It's insane to me, and I'll never understand it. And they refuse to understand it as a medium. And the fact that like you have so many places where you can incorporate meaning and message. You have Gatsby, who represents the person who achieved the American dream. So he's like the new money, like he came from nothing. He made a name for himself. He's chasing after this dream. Tom represents the old money. So he's like the person who was born into money, born into wealth, born into this power. Daisy and the green light. So the green light itself is like the dream, and then Daisy represents like the success, the happiness, the contentment that comes with achieving whatever dream. Tom, I think the reason they didn't have him sing until the one part, in a way he didn't feel like he needed to.
No, I mean, I didn't notice it until he started singing.
Right. But he's in power the whole show. He didn't have to sing until he had to pull his power back. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
So to me, like Tom, in the book, I very much felt like Tom was careless with what was his, which is Daisy, right? He didn't feel like he had to treat his car, his everything he has, he just has this sense of ownership over, and this sense of like, this is mine. No one else will ever even take this from me because I'm entitled to it because I was born into it. Like, this is mine. And then as soon as Gatsby comes along and is like, actually, this is mine, Tom is like, wait a minute. And in the show, he has to defend himself, and he has to say, you're not going to take Daisy from me. And that's why I think they didn't have him sing until then. Because I think the point is he didn't have to. And Gatsby, like through the whole show, is showing off his wealth, is showing off his voice, is showing off everything, is showing everyone how great he is. He spent the whole time having to prove how great he is. Because no one will ever just believe it, because he wasn't entitled to it, because he wasn't born into it.
Can I say one thing? When you're talking about like the dream and the green light and how it presents this unattainable dream, it's almost kind of, I guess, ironic that they're doing like a musical out of it, because I would say a lot of people's unattainable dream is to be a performer. So is that not kind of like in a way, when you're watching it, don't you long to be up on stage doing exactly what they're doing? And it's kind of like not unattainable for you at this point, but kind of.
It's unattainable for a lot of people. First of all, everyone was amazing. No casting complaints. You made a point about the Jeremy Jordan dancing. I feel like that was the only thing. Both Jeremy and the guy who played Wolfsheim, when they started dancing, like you see the actor instead of the character, which you never want. That idea of the unattainable dream, I think it was roped into the fabric of the show. I think you saw it in the choreography. I think you saw it in the set pieces. I think you saw it in the lighting. You saw it in the sound design. You saw it in the songs. You saw it in everything. You saw it in the way they played the characters. You saw it in the way the story played out. That idea that there's this dream that is unattainable, and that we think of this dream as like, I can reach this, I can grab this, and when I do, I'll have this happiness that I just believe exists out there, and this contentment that just like, once I achieve my dream, all of my problems will be solved. Myrtle believes that, because she thinks once Tom accepts her, that she'll have the life that she wants. And Wilson believes that because he thinks if he can move them out west, that's what's going to make them content. And Gatsby believes it because he believes that once he has Daisy, that's what's going to make him content. And in a way, Nick believes that too, because he moves all the way there.
And you're talking about like how the people, like how each character represents something.
Yes.
Like, and even the unattainable dream things, it like our character, the person we were supposed to relate to, was the gas man. I don't know his name. Wilson. Looking back, he's the everyday man, and he was really the one who's the most like us, who's like wishing for things that just like would never.
Yeah, and Myrtle, I never got all the way through all the characters, but Myrtle is supposed to represent the people who like worship the ruling class, who think that if they like just suck the dick of the ruling class, that the ruling class will then in turn take care of them. So see, like this is what I'm saying, like it's there. And I gotta be honest with you, if I didn't go into it knowing that it was about the American dream, would I have picked up on that specifically? I don't know. I truly can't tell. I could tell you that I probably would have gotten to the idea of like reaching for a dream that's not real, right? Like, because in the book they play up a little bit more that Daisy is not the person that Gatsby remembers her to be, and that's the only thing I felt like was kind of missing from the show, is that like there are many points where like Gatsby,
That's real tea.
yeah, like Gatsby has made Daisy into this like perfect,
Wow, that's real.
and like
That's
she's not,
relatable.
yeah.
That's relatable.
Yeah. Like, she's not that way at all. She never was. So, yeah. So, when I say music disjointed, I mean specifically in the first act, there was a so Gatsby came out 20 minutes into the first act, and I know that wasn't how it was in the Paper Mill Playhouse version, which was like the preview of this show. They changed it a bunch. I watched a whole video about it. Wait in the Wings, shout out. They talked about changing it because they felt like it wasn't doing what they needed it to do. But I kind of feel like it was because of the critics, because people were saying it was too different from the book, because Gatsby introduced the show and Gatsby was like a part of the whole thing. I felt like I knew when the rewrite stopped. Just whiplash when Gatsby came out for his song. And that's why I said to you afterwards, at some point in our walk or train ride somewhere, that I felt like if Jeremy Jordan wasn't playing that part, that was something that everyone would have felt. Like there would have been a point where Gatsby came out where you were like, sorry, what the fuck? But it's like Jeremy Jordan is so good, and you even cited like that song being your favorite that he sang.
And out of the whole show, I mean, he was amazing.
No, he's
like superhuman.
There's a reason why he is like the heartthrob of Broadway. There's a reason why I've been in love with him since I was 12. They usually can't even explain in words. And like hearing it live, it was everything I wanted it to be and more. Gatsby is supposed to have a really weird accent that nobody can place. Like that's actually written into the book. That he's a really weird accent to where people are like, where are you from? So I like that they kept that. That was like a tiny detail they kept. That he just had a weird accent, no one ever talked about it. Whenever Nick was in the apartment with everybody else, and he's like kind of singing, it had to be after, because he's singing about how he's really thinking about Gatsby's offer. And he's just like fully basically singing to the audience. Like Tom is not a good person, and he's cheating on his wife, and Gatsby basically said, please connect me with his wife. And now I feel like I do want to call Gatsby because I don't like Tom. And I want Daisy to be with Gatsby instead of Tom. And he basically was just talking out his internal monologue to the audience. And I was like, oh my God.
I do think like that I would have understood without him. Yeah, I think they definitely did over explain that.
Did you feel like it was just a love story, nothing else?
No.
Because you said to me, you were like, that looks like a pool. What happens in the pool? I said, I'm not telling you what happens in the pool. And you said, okay. And then when the pool scene started, you started crying. And I was like, bitch, I thought you didn't know what happened in the pool.
Okay, yes, but also they spoiled it at the beginning.
Don't say the plot of the musical in the audience, guys.
Yeah, it was that girl. It was like a girl and her dad were behind us. They were actually really cute.
Aww.
But he laughed out loud at some of the most random parts. It was so funny. It was so funny. He was laughing out loud.
Yeah.
But yeah, they spoiled the ending for me. But I mean, you kind of knew. No, I guess you didn't know what was coming.
In the in-show? I feel like it would have been surprising if you didn't know.
Yeah.
Wilson appears, and I think people knew then something was off.
Yes, and I think because they said that, and then I noticed that the tiling had extended from the pool up to his house, which we hadn't seen before.
The set design of his house, the pool imagery was projected onto there. So the place he died was projected up onto his house where he had lived. These are the tiny details that I'm saying. This is where people are so quick to be like, it didn't get the message across. So there's a line in the book that's very famous about Tom and Daisy being really careless. They're careless people, and they run around and they make these messes, and then they let other people clean them up. I don't remember the exact line. I was very curious to see if they wrote that in at all, and if so, how. And I really liked how they did it, with like Nick being really upset and kind of yelling at, was it Tom or Daisy? Daisy. He was yelling at Daisy, and he was like, both so careless, like you don't care who you hurt. Like that, they didn't use the exact line.
Yeah.
But it was like he was basically saying, like, you just retreat back to your money and you don't care.
He was real. He pulled up and he said, and why didn't you come to Gatsby's funeral? Pull up a chair. And why didn't you come to Gatsby's funeral?
Wait, let's have a talk.
And while we're on it, you're running away to Honolulu?
Yeah, that was weird. Like, sometimes people think that them not liking a character is, like, unique. And I'm like, sometimes, like, if you don't like a character, it was probably intentional by the writers. And, like, I did not like Daisy at the end. I did not like Tom. And I felt like that was very intentional. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like they don't have to explicitly say to you, Daisy and Tom are the evil characters in this story. Tom is the villain. For you to get that, like, Tom is the villain and Daisy's not the best. You know what I mean? Big shout out to my sister Val for giving her opinion.
Subscribe. You know I'm subscribed.
I have a few follow-up thoughts now that it's been a few days, and I'm also sober in this moment. I am so angry at the theater fans of the world because if you have not seen a show, you don't know. You don't know what it's about. You don't know how it represents anything. Nothing irritates me more than people who will see one person who saw the regional run on Reddit say that the show isn't a good adaptation or whatever, and then everybody just runs with that. And all of a sudden, everything is about how bad this show is. It was not bad. From the bottom of my heart, this was a really, really good show. This is probably one of my favorite shows I've seen in a long time. It was incredible. It was really, really good. And Broadway shows have a hard enough time surviving without everybody just deciding they hate one because they think a better one is coming. And that was the thing that really irritated me about this, and part of what drove me to do this whole thing was everybody was just like, oh, this musical is shit. Florence Welch is writing one and that one's gonna be better. And just like all of the commentary on this is like, save me, Florence Welch. You guys know absolutely nothing about the musical that Florence Welch is writing. Nobody can know anything about it because it just started running 2 weeks ago. So why am I seeing comments months ago that it's better than the show that's running? You don't know that. And it just drives me crazy because as much as I love theater, there is almost no fan base I hate more than theater fans because they do shit like this and they just hear that a show is bad or that a show is good, and then all of a sudden that's like the communal opinion because it's so hard to see the shows themselves because they're all the way in New York, so we just trust the like 5 people on Reddit who have actually gone to see these shows. What if those people are stupid? I feel like it's so different to specifically say if somebody says the message wasn't there and I went to see it and I felt like the message was really obvious, then I think it's a fair criticism of those critics to say, I feel like you just didn't get it because the message was there. You just didn't see it. And like people these days just want there to be a line in it that is like, this show is about the American dream. And because they didn't do that, that meant the message wasn't there. And like, I truly, from the bottom of my heart, I disagree with that. And I don't think it's deserved half of the hate that it's gotten. I had like the 1 or 2 songs that I was kind of like, oh, this is weird. And everything else in the show was incredible. You have to see it with your own eyes. Let's not be writing think pieces before we actually watch it. That's all I want to say about that. Harsh segue, but I don't really know how to go from a rant to the next thing I want to say easily. Eventually, my trip to New York ended, and it was time for me to head up to Boston to see the art theater Gatsby. I fully intended to get B-roll of my whole journey up there, but then I almost missed my train. My train was at like 7 a.m., but I made the wrong decision as to which subway to take, and I ended up waiting 20 minutes for the train to come. I was the last person on, and they closed the doors less than 10 seconds after I got on the train. It was a profoundly humbling experience, but it also led to me not having that much B-roll because I obviously wasn't going to be trying to film. Like, I was trying to make the train. I highly recommend this train ride. The views out the window are super pretty. They have Wi-Fi, and it was very nice and relaxing, and I slept for a lot of it. We pulled into Boston, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, it was time to see Gatsby. They do the phone free thing where you put your phone in a pouch, so I don't have any shots of the inside of the theater or my seat, but I was 5 rows back all the way to the stage right, so I had like an incredible view of this show. The set is this massive silver piece. It's all kind of one piece made of crumpled car parts, which I thought was a super cool touch. The musicians are on stage, which I like. I like having the musicians on stage. I like being able to see them. There's a staircase from the rafters that like cuts off in the middle, and then there's another staircase that comes down from this side. I wish I could have gotten a picture of it, you guys. I'm sorry. I liked it, except this big staircase from the ceiling, they just didn't use that much. And I don't know if it's because of sight lines. Like, I don't know if everyone in the audience couldn't see that much of the staircase, but they would put ensemble up there to do some dance pieces, so they did use it, but it's just like from leftover from my dance days. Like, my dance teacher was like, if you have a set piece, use it. If you're not going to use the set piece, don't have it on stage. And the reason I'm criticizing that, normally I wouldn't care, but the stage was not very big, and so this limited the amount of space they had down on the ground to work with, and it could cause some of the choreography to feel very cramped, in my opinion. But they also had these big curtains that were kind of made of the like Party City like stringy material that were silver that they could move to allow set pieces to come out. It just looked kind of cheap to me. It didn't look the best, I'm gonna be honest. I liked the big piece with all the cars, but I didn't like the curtains. I thought they detracted. I would have preferred, I think, a black curtain, but that's just a personal thing. They had a car like front that came onto the stage at one point and then came off. It was silver, but they kept calling it a yellow car. Listen, I get that budgets can be tight. I don't understand how it would be more expensive to make it yellow than to make it silver. Like, it was a shiny silver. It seemed intentionally made to be silver. But if you want to do it that way, then call it a silver car. Like, it was very confusing as an audience member for them to be like, look at this yellow car. And the car is like very clearly silver. Like, it was just really weird. And now as I'm saying this, I'm like, is there commentary there? Are they trying to say that like everybody views this thing as yellow, but it's actually silver because everybody views the American dream as this big dream, but it's actually not? I mean, I don't know. Maybe that is what they were trying to do, but I can tell you that as a viewer, I was very confused by the silver car that they were calling yellow because it's just not a yellow car. But the costuming was really cool. They had like this rust color, like all of the every single costume kind of faded into this rusty color at the bottom, adding to that feel of this like gasoline soaked valley of the ashes. And I thought it was cool. I thought it was a cool touch. All of the main characters had essentially like a color that was what they wore a lot of the time. You know, there were little hints here and there, like Daisy and Tom were both wearing white for a lot of the beginning of the show, and when Daisy is seeing Gatsby, she has pink on her costume, and Gatsby was wearing a pink suit the whole time. And then at the end of the show, her costume is back to full white. So there's little things like that in there as well. One of the interesting similarities between this show and the other one was that they styled Jordan and Daisy almost identically. Fascinating. Like, same cut of dress, same general shape. Jordan was wearing pants the whole time. I thought that was fascinating. Again, it's like two different artistic interpretations of the same work, and they seem to have made a similar choice about that. My only complaint about the costumes at all is that both Daisy and Myrtle had these like spaghetti strap kind of costumes where the straps were falling down. For like it happened to them multiple times in multiple different costumes that they were wearing. That is ridiculous. That totally feels to me like something that a producer was like, oh, we don't want to spend any more money on the costumes, so the actors are just gonna have to deal with it. And it's such a bad choice. And that's why I'm gonna harp on it for a second, because it irritated me so much, not because of the actors, but because of the costumers and the producers who are apparently, it seems, making the active decision not to fix these costumes so that they fit these poor girls. Myrtle's costumes were not loose. Like, they were not loose fitting costumes. They were tight. Up here, they were tight all the way to like the waist. She had like a bralette, and it was the bralette strap, I think, like in the red thing that she wore over the bralette, but it was like the thing she was wearing under it was like a tight bralette that would like basically fit like this, and then it had straps, and the straps would come down. Like, that just doesn't fit. I felt so bad for her. And she was giving the performance of a lifetime, and her costume was fighting against her. Maybe I have too high of expectations, but if this show is destined for Broadway, forgive me for saying the costume should fit the actors. Like, ridiculous. There was a point where both of them had fallen down, and she was like restricted. Like, I watched her not be able to do choreography fully because the straps were pulling on her fucking arms. Embarrassing for the show, not for her. Like, she was incredible. I'm like, the producers and the costumers need to figure that out, and they need to have figured it out 2 weeks ago. They need to have figured it out during previews. I absolutely cannot believe that the show went up and this girl's straps don't fit. How long does it take you to tighten straps? Oh, God, I'm actually angry now. I feel so bad for them. Put them in costumes that fit. That's like the bare minimum. Where am I? Okay. Oh, the dancing was cool. All of the choreography was in the same style, but it was very unique. Like, I was trying to nail down, like, I would just call it postmodern, but like postmodern doesn't really like mean anything. What I really felt like they did was kind of like made a dance style for the show that was very like specific, but a lot of the movement was like based in the same, almost like base technique, for lack of a better way to word it, or base like feel to it that was like unique to the show, to the point where if I were to see muted choreography of the dancers in costume, I could tell you that was from the Art Theater Gatsby. Like, I could say, oh, I've seen that before. I thought it was incredible. The actors were all super good. I already have kind of talked about how good Myrtle was. She blew everybody else out of the water. And if Myrtle hadn't been in it, I might have just been like, damn, all these actors were really, really good, and like moved on with my life. But it was because Myrtle was there and she was just like setting the standard that every time she was on stage, it's like, it is about this woman and this woman's voice and her performance. And she was awesome. But everybody else was really, really good too. Their accents were a little weird, but I don't know if they just need more practice with them. They had everybody else have an accent except for Gatsby and Nick, and that's kind of the opposite choice that the other show made, which I thought was super interesting. And I do think it was probably a very distinct choice because, again, in the book, it's like Gatsby has this accent that no one can really place. There's a cool aspect of like, oh, Nick and Gatsby are like the audience, and so is George, and he didn't have an accent either. But then Myrtle and Tom and Daisy and Jordan all have these like weird transatlantic, hard to place accents because from our perspective, like they're the ones that are different than us. So I understand the choice. I just think they need to practice the accents a little bit more because there were points where the accent kind of dropped or like they did something kind of weird with it where I was a little bit like pulled out of the performance. The plot very much stuck to the book. I don't really have much to say there. Musically, I loved it. I mean, I love Florence and the Machine, so that style of music, it was cool to see it in a Broadway show, and it was cool to kind of see where they made it sound more like big band Broadway-y and where it really sounded explicitly like a Florence and the Machine song. I don't have the soundtrack, and I will not have access to the soundtrack for a very long time because they won't record it until it's already open on Broadway, so it's probably 6 months to a year before we'll get a soundtrack, if we get one at all, because it has to make it to Broadway and then it has to be popular enough that people want a soundtrack for them to put the money into making one. But I really hope that they do. And I genuinely think that some of the songs from this would like chart on mainstream charts, which is hard for a Broadway musical to do. The soundtrack was incredible. Like it was so good. And like there will be songs that will make my playlists when it comes out, which is true of the other show as well. But like in my opinion, for me and my taste, more so true for this show. However, my only critique, like I said, it feels like at every point in the show, it's like I loved so much of it, and then there was like one thing that I was like, whoa. And I do feel like the first act was way too long. Specifically, it felt long. I'm like, an hour and a half for a first act, I guess, isn't crazy. There was a moment in the first act where I was like, this act has been really long. And I think the reason for it is because they had a lot of ballads. I just don't think we need that many ballads. And then Jordan wasn't a big part of this show at all. I kind of talked about that already, but she as a character was actually very much like a side character, and they made the show more about like Myrtle and Daisy, which I actually loved as a choice. They also did have a green light that was kind of off stage, which I thought was really fun. That was like off stage off to the side, that it was like off stage but like the audience could see it. Like it's like if the stage is in front of you, the light was like over here, and so that was kind of cool. And there were points where the light was on. Daisy was standing in front of the light and Gatsby was like talking to Daisy, and then Daisy walked away and Gatsby was facing the light. Like they did a lot of really cool stuff with it. I liked that. I liked the incorporation of the green light and the messaging. It was definitely very dark. It was much darker than the Broadway theater Gatsby. I would very much consider this more of a tragedy, whereas the other show was kind of like a musical comedy that turns into a tragedy, which is what they wanted. That's what the writers said they were trying to do. So it's just very different. That's what I'm saying. These shows are just wildly different, and even trying to compare them is a little bit hard. They made the show a lot more inclusive as well, which I appreciate a lot. I don't know if I want to spoil this or not. There's a reveal. I mean, I guess I've openly talked about the show. If you want to skip ahead like 2 seconds, I'm just going to say this quickly. There was a reveal at the end that Gatsby is at least half Native American. His dad comes out and his dad is Native American. I thought that was an awesome touch. I thought that was a really cool change with the whole message of the show and the American dream. And so it was a really cool like added layer to the whole thing to make it so that Gatsby was Native American. They also made Nick gay. I think it's great for us to just have more characters that are casually LGBTQ+ in everything that we're watching.
I wanted to clarify here that what I meant by casually was just that it wasn't a very core piece of the plot, and I think that that's good, because I think right now there are writers that think that if you make a character LGBTQ+, that has to become the thing that their entire character centers around and that their journey centers around. And I think that another step towards seeing more equality and representation in media is having characters be LGBTQ+ and have that be a part of the story, but not have it be a core centerpiece of the plot, and that we have LGBTQ+ characters in all of our media. And so I thought that was a good choice.
And the last thing, they did also have, very similarly to the other show, the song at the end that kind of like explains the message of the show and that says the final line in the book. Both of the shows kind of ended that way, except that in the Art Theater Gatsby, they finished the line. So if you remember when I was reading it, I very distinctly called out that it cuts off. I'm going to show it to you guys. So it says, like, look. So you can see down at the bottom of this paragraph that I have marked how it dashes, and then the next line happens. So the end of that line is, tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther, ... and one fine morning, dash, and then it goes, so we beat on, boats against the current. born back ceaselessly into the past in another line. You see what I'm saying? They finish the line. I remember them just saying, we belong. That's like what they used to like finish that line. I think now I'm like second guessing myself. No! Why did you do that? Why? Like I was sat for this whole performance. I was so into it. And then they did that. The point is that the line cuts off. The point is that we keep running with our arms outstretched. The point is that we never reach the goal. It's the point. The point of the line is that we never get to the end. I was so upset. That's the point. Oh man, it really got to me. Obviously, I'm like turning red. I was so upset. I cannot believe. I get that it kind of delivers better in the book, but the point of the line is that we're running with our arms outstretched and we never reach it. And there's something very genius about the way that this sentence never ends, because our journey never ends, because we never reach the green light. We never reach the goal. To finish the line is a crime. And I thought it took away from the power of that line. It was really upsetting to me, obviously. But all in all, I don't think either show was perfect. And I do certainly think that both of them have some room for improvement. I think both of them could be made a little bit more seamless. I think, one of them needs to be a little bit shorter. The other maybe needs to introduce the idea of Gatsby going for something, or just change his big song. I don't know, because it just was such a hard shift. And I really think they need to relook at the song. I mean, it's Frozen, so they're not going to do it. But like the song where Nick has kind of his, oh, maybe I do want to help Gatsby. Like, there were moments in that show where I was like, what is going on? And yet with the other show, I felt like the first act was like a little long, and I also felt like there were all these like random little choices that I didn't understand. And that wasn't really true of the other show. The other show, really my only issue with it was the weird disjointedness of that first act. I don't really think either of these shows are like long-term classics. I would be very surprised if either of them ran longer than like 2 or 3 years. I thought all of the dancers were incredible, and all of the actors were incredible, honestly. Like every performance I saw was like a performance for the ages, and Jeremy Jordan really stuck out of the Broadway theater Gatsby, and Saleha Pfeiffer really stuck out of the art theater Gatsby. That doesn't mean that the other actors were bad. Like everybody was good, and everybody was giving the performance of a lifetime. Everybody was putting in what they needed to put in for the show, and I was sat for both of these shows. And as much as I've just told you all the little things I didn't like, I was having a blast in the audience of both of these shows. And there was a moment like when the first act was really stretching where I was like, am I gonna end up regretting coming all the way to Boston to see this show? Because my day was really hectic and my foot really hurt at that point. At the end, I ended up feeling like it was really worth it. I'm happy I got the experience to see both these shows, because I just think it was really cool just to experience that theater history. Like that was so fun. I was laughing, I was crying, I was cheering, like I was in it for both of these shows. The shows that tend to last are the shows that are unique and good. And sometimes a show is unique, but it's not very good. And sometimes a show is good, but it's not very unique. I feel like Gatsby, if they tweak some of these little things that I've mentioned, I think they could be in that category of like good and unique. But right now, I think its uniqueness was supporting it a little bit because of all these weird little touches. But it was a regional theater show. So I imagine it will get better as they do it more and more, and they get more used to doing it. It'll become more seamless. And I imagine that they'll make changes and they'll update things between the regional theater run and the Broadway run, because the shows usually do. Take that with a grain of salt. But then following, I felt like Gatsby at the Broadway theater was really, really good, but it maybe wasn't all that unique. You know what I'm saying? This was so fun, you guys. I hope you enjoyed. I want to know, I mean, obviously it's kind of hard if you haven't seen the shows, but I want to know what you guys think in the comments. Like, I know there's been a lot of discourse about these shows. I had a blast at both of these shows. I really loved both of them. And I just generally, like, I want theater to succeed. I never go into a show wanting it to be bad. I never go into a show wanting the actors to give a bad performance. Like, I'm rooting for everybody, and I'm rooting for both of these shows. I hope I'm wrong that they don't last. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. I'm gonna have a bear of a time editing this because I have so much footage and I don't want it to be too long. But I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!